Welcome back to Tar Heel Illustrated. I am Bryant Balcom here with publisher Andrew Jones, who is inside of Madison Square Garden in New York City. We're back for another edition of Three Things following UNC's 76-74 win over UCLA. And it was a win that was much needed for UNC, but one that started off like their last 5 or 6 games have against Power 4 opponents, trailing by double figures and just trailing early and often, as they so have, AJ.
Yeah, Power Five. Well, actually, and I think Dayton, we need to consider them sort of a power conference type team. They run the program that way. And I'm looking at this as quad one games. They've now played 8 quad one games. They're 2-6 now, so this gave them the win, their second win. And in all 8 of those games, they've fallen behind by at least 13 points in the first half of every one of them. Every one of them. It happened again today. They made a push. I thought there were times UCLA was in position to maybe push that lead to 16, 17, 18 in the first half. Didn't do it. Carolina, I thought, was a little scrappier responding to the run in the first half than like against Florida the other night. Florida had the 28-10 run, and Carolina was just very passive. Didn't really do anything to try to slam the run to a stop. Tonight, I thought the Tar Heels didn't slam it so much to a stop, but I thought they did more aggressive things. And what that did was it was a little bit of insight, a precursor perhaps to what was going to happen later, because they handled that better in the first half. And even though it went up to 16 in the second half, and they were not defending, and I thought, man, they're really going to get a run out of this thing. It helped them that Tyler Bilodeau picked up his 4th foul. He went to the bench, and it was a 14-point game. By the time he came back in, it was a 3-point game with 5:15 left, I think it was. So they took advantage of an opportunity, which is something that they didn't do against Auburn. They didn't do it against Alabama. They didn't do it the other night against Florida. And because of that, they positioned themselves to be grittier and better to close the game out than they had been. So the precursor was not allowing that run to kill them essentially in the first half, to make it so it would take so much out of them to come back. In the second half, they still had some more. It was a little bit more of a mojo game that they were able to keep at a decent level, and then when they had to pick it up, they were right there. And they did that late, and they closed them out. We'll hit on that here in a second, but they closed them out with UCLA scoring a field goal in the last 3:42. And I think it all goes back to the first half. Now, they were bad in the first half. They had a lot of turnovers. They had 3 turnovers in the first half where players had the ball and stepped on the sideline.
Careless, not forced at all whatsoever.
The body language was terrible at times. Elliot Cadeau really, really struggled. His body language told, the picture tells 1,000 words. That was the case. What was their saving grace was Ian Jackson. And in transition, he had 8 points in transition in about a 6-minute period, twice off feeds from Seth Trimble. And Ian kind of kept him in the game. He was fearless. He attacked. And I think he kind of gave the rest of the guys a little bit of belief in life, because they told us afterward that they were anxious. There's stress and anxiety. They've been talking about it really for a while. So during that period when they allowed UCLA to go up big, Tar Heels had 11 turnovers, I think, in the first half, or during that stretch.
11 in the first half, 7 in the second half.
They were missing free throws. Front end of 1-and-1 free throws. They were missing free throws. Their half-court offense was atrocious. I mean, Ian Jackson made plays because Ian Jackson made plays. But their half-court, it's wild, because we got to sit basically courtside here and watching UCLA run its offense right in front of us in the first half. There's 3 and 4 guys moving constantly. Carolina, they're running its offense, and there's 1 guy moving. Often the only guy moving was a big going out top to set a screen. It was predictable. UCLA knew what they were going to do. This isn't the first time
we easy to jump in the passing lanes as well. Made that.
Yeah, this isn't the first time we've talked about the opponent knowing what they were going to do. Very, very predictable. Guys shooting through. You can't shoot yourself into a hot streak. You have to play yourself into a hot streak. And they were trying to shoot themselves into a hot streak. And look, they won the game. And it would be easy to gloss that over, but in all the coverage that I compile here in the next 3-4 hours, I'm going to have a lot of that in there, because that problem is still there. It's just that they overcame it today, finally, and UCLA helped them a lot to overcome it as well. This wasn't just Carolina grabbed the game by the throat and squeezed it. UCLA kind of went like this. I'm not going to fend you off. So the first half was not very impressive. It was a series of dribble, dribble, drive, and fall, like we've talked about before. There were more kickouts. There were more swings. They were looking for perimeter shots. But even when UCLA was in a man defense, it looked like Carolina was running zone offense. It's just not a pretty half-court offense, and it should be very, very different than it is because of its composition. You cannot continue to run that kind of offense when you have no post scoring at all. In fact, I think with 3 minutes left in the first half, I tweeted out that Carolina's big guys had combined for 1 point. The guys playing the 5 spot, 1 point. And when Jay Wash had to put back late in the game with a minute and a half left, you're like, hey, that's a 5-man onslaught right there. Not to be critical or too funny, but it's true. So go back and listen to the Florida game about them falling way behind. Go back and listen to the 3 things after Auburn and Dayton and Michigan State and Kansas and Alabama and all that stuff. And it's the same thing, the same problem. The only difference is I thought there was a little bit more scrap by Carolina, and they didn't allow a 28-10 run. They didn't allow a 23-4 run or something like that. It wasn't as sizable, the margins in the runs. Even though the lead went up to 16, it was after 2 quick threes, I think, by Bilodeau. And he made it go from 10 to 13 to 16 just like that. So it was a 16-point game, but it wasn't this. It didn't feel like an insurmountable 16-point game, even though I thought, man, here they go, because we've seen it so many times. And they didn't.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I agree, it did not feel like – it was 16 points, but they're – even against Kansas, the other night against Florida, those felt a lot more demoralizing in the way the teams were extending that lead. It felt like it was more of like getting punched in the mouth versus just the quick-hitting threes they had that can kind of be came in like a 30-second span.
Yeah. Well, and that's why those 2 comebacks took everything out of the heels. And then both Florida and Kansas closed out Carolina by dominating the last 3.5, 4 minutes. That wasn't the case today. So they were better. It's weird. It's crazy to say, and I can't believe I'm actually going to say this on a recording in public. They weren't as bad falling behind by 16 as they were falling behind by 17 to Florida, if that makes any sense whatsoever. They were in more of a springboard position to continue to play ball and have a chance. The reason I'm thinking here they go again, and they may get this thing run out, because I was thinking to myself, boy, they're already playing kind of hard, a little harder, a little bit better in some areas, scrappier, more physically in some areas, and they're down 16. And this thing is about to get out of control. But UCLA didn't pull away and didn't get it out of control, because I don't think UCLA is quite at Florida's level. Alabama, Kansas, Auburn. Those 4 teams are all better than UCLA. I think they're more like Michigan State than those other teams.
And I think one thing you hit on earlier that looked different in this game, not talking about the opponent, but just UNC itself, was the confidence they had. And I think that just stemmed from having someone like Ian Jackson, because for me, just watching, it felt like when UNC needed a bucket or UNC needed something to stop a run or get themselves momentum, he was there. It all stemmed back to him, no matter how you slice it.
The drives, when they're in that spread, I guess we'll call it a spread offense, when they got all the dudes in the perimeter, a lot of times it's looked like, okay, you're up. It's like duck, duck, goose when the preschool teacher, the kindergarten teacher walks behind and taps someone on the back, and they're the one that has to whatever the duck, duck, goose does. And it's like Carolina's offense is like that, where someone gets tapped in the back and they get the ball at the perimeter and say, okay, now it's my time. And it's ridiculously ugly a lot of the time. What Ian did was he showed them that the drives could actually be made. He scored 24 points today, and I'm not sure he got a screen. What's interesting is the one time they clearly ran a play for him, he dropped the ball right in front of the bench, wide open for 3.
I believe UNC was down 3, and it looked like the plan was to get him, screen him open for a 3-point shot.
Yeah, well, it was. They ran it, and he dropped it. It's like the easiest thing that he's experienced all year. It's like, oh, crap. I need the scale of difficulty, the degree of difficulty to be much higher in order to excel, because it is difficult. Because when he drives, there's still nobody moving. How many times did we see kickouts tonight from drives that just the ball floats out to the perimeter. UCLA had a lot of that too. Had some turnovers from it. Carolina did too, and lost the ball a few times. Ian, though, we see a difference in an absolute lock NBA guy. His ability to turn the first step into the second, third, fourth, and fifth while continuing to gain an edge and then getting up and getting shots off, as opposed to a lot of other guys who have a really good first step, but then they have a not so NBA second step and a college third step and fourth step, if that makes any sense. And with Ian, the fearlessness, he was feeding off the crowd. Every time he was doing something, the crowd was getting more. They loved the New York guys doing stuff. So the whole building wanted Ian and RJ to go for 30 each. And it was a very, very pro-Carolina crowd in there tonight. But I really thought that Ian played with maturity. It was the most mature game he's played, not just because he scored a bunch of points. He was better defensively. He did take him out a little bit late defensively at times, a couple times for when Carolina had to get locked down on the other end. But I thought Carolina defended pretty well in stretches in the second half, and he was on the floor. And he was playing better off the ball. A guy like Ian Jackson has never in his life until he got to Carolina had to play any off-ball defense. It didn't matter. It never mattered. Suddenly now he has to. And what we saw today was a guy who had a little bit more college IQ basketball as a part of his game. Because even his shots, there are times where he rushes shots. There are times where he takes shots. You think, well, if you didn't know any better, you'd say, well, that's the guy trying to get his. I thought all of his shots were good shots. And he's spotting up well on the perimeter. A couple of years ago, I remember David Sisk wrote a piece where he did an interview with Ian's high school coach. And he said, look, he's not shooting well from three, but he's working on it. And he looked a little more comfortable. Still not the prettiest thing, but he looked comfortable spotting. He spotted like a guy who wanted the shot, wanted the ball, sink the shot, and he did that. He was 4 for 4 to start the game, and he was 3 for 3 from three. 2 of those threes were in transition. And if you can get a 6'4" guy who can take it to the rim and finish, who can also spot up and shoot in the perimeter, that makes an already good transition game a lot better. And Carolina, that's the one area they've been consistently good, transition game.
And I think you hit the nail on the head of he's comfortable and confident. And we've seen that the past couple of games. Even in Florida, they had to clear out ISOs, and the crowd, not only was a crowd cheering for him, but you could tell he was relishing that moment. And he did that at times today too. But it felt like when UNC needed something, they turned to him, and he, I don't want to say leader because that's probably not the right word, but he was kind of the pace car for when they needed something, they could turn to him. And
I'm going to add to what you're saying. So it's a good point. I think what it was some older guys saying it's okay to be you. Like RJ's, you can see it almost happen, especially I love when we're close because we can see some of the communication. And there were 2 occasions once RJ came down the court and did not pass to Ian. He was open. RJ went up, got fouled one time with the line. Another time he got a shot off and he did not score. And Ian said something to him, and RJ did this. Like, my bad. You were open. I saw you didn't get you the ball. So what you saw were the older guys letting Ian know, hey, you're him. You can be that guy. So be that guy here. And he was. So a lot of what he did was the other guys letting him know it was okay. And people may say that's a minor thing or may poo-poo it, but that's a huge thing in the walls of a locker room. You play college baseball, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And for a young guy to feel his oats, that's a huge step forward. And I'll also tell you this much. Did you see the starting lineup start second half? Ian Jackson was the de facto 4-man. Ty Claude started. 6'7", 6'4", 6'3", 6'1", 6 feet. Hubert's like, look, we got these guys that are hard to guard. We got to force someone to change. They haven't done a lot of. They should have been doing it all along. They should have been forcing teams to adapt to them all year, and they haven't done it. They did do that some with UCLA today. And that was among several reasons why they won the game. And I think Ian was the reason they were able to do it. And also Ty Claude, as I sidebar to him very quickly, I mean, he uses his lower half of the body. He uses that midsection. He's not afraid to bang. Someone ought to put that dude in a 4-point stance next year. Seriously. I could see him shooting the gap, man, just owning a gap somewhere in football. He's got a lot of that brawn, and it's something they desperately need down there.
Well, they desperately needed just the front court to have some type of presence, but they really also just needed this win.
Yeah.
You're facing 6-6 heading into, or assuming 7-6 with a win over Campbell on Sunday, but they would have been 6-6 had they lost this game, and they were facing a tough uphill climb for an at-large berth if that would have been the case. And even as we had seen in the last couple games where it's against Florida or Michigan State, Kansas, where they were in those close games, they could not finish it. And I personally think this is the game I thought they had the least amount of business winning because they just weren't leading for much of it, if at all. They led for 50 seconds, but when it mattered most, they stepped up. And even though they hadn't done that in the past couple of close games, you could see almost some relief when Drake Powell came down with that rebound. And with 0.1 seconds left, you could see the relief in their face, and they finally closed out a close game, which they had just not done all since the Dayton game, really.
UCLA did not score a field goal the last 3:42. Had three free throws. Does that
finished
sound
3 for 13 from the field?
Does that remind you of anybody?
A team that we saw on Tuesday night.
Tuesday night. I can go on and on. We see that a lot. When they're in position to do it, that's what's happened. Go back to Lawrence, Kansas. First Friday of the season, we saw it. That's kind of been who they are. They closed it out. The physicality that they brought those last 10 minutes of the game didn't stop. I even tweeted out, and I put on our board that here's the space of the game where they've been coming back and they're in position to finally write a new script, and they haven't done it. Will they do it? And it took them a while to take the lead. They have taken the lead in that, 4 to 8, 9 minute range. It took a little longer for them to do it. They had to keep working. So there was no sense of satisfaction. We overcame that lead now. And also, hey, there's still 4.5 minutes of game to play. So they didn't have that, and they kept at it. And I thought that defensively, I'm not going to say they locked down a ton, but they were disruptive enough. Mm-hmm. It helped them that Bilodeau picked up 4 fouls and missed the game. I think if he doesn't get in foul trouble, maybe this thing's a blowout. Who knows? He's really good. He was the best player on the floor. He was better than Ian. Best player on the floor today, I thought. Ian was second best player on the floor. Not tremendous difference. Both equally important to their team. But there was a foul when Van Allen Lubin picked up his last foul. And this was one of those moments where I thought, okay, how are they going to handle this? Because there was a really bad attempt of a screen set on Seth Trimble at the top of the key. Seth got around it. There was some hip action. But Lubin picked up his man and kind of gotten Seth's way from guarding him. He's driving the basket like this. Seth would have stayed with him. But Lubin kind of got in Seth's way, impeded his path, and then Lubin picked up his 4th foul. And Seth immediately said something to him about it. And you could sort of see, okay, we've seen – it's not a finger-pointing moment, but it's a conversation moment about, hey, I could have stayed with him. Maybe he did the wrong thing. And Lubin was pulled at that point because it was his 4th foul, but I could see he turned back and yelled something to Seth, and it was a positive thing, as if I understand, I got it. And that was one of those little moments that you watch, which you can see more clearly up close than when they stick us in the rafters, that, okay, they're handling this right now. They're not too stressed. Mm-hmm. And it's surprising because I would have been. I would imagine Carolina fans were like, my God, can't these guys just get a win? Lord, give them a win. You know what I mean? They're working so hard, and they were not. And they actually, I think that's why they made the plays. Jalen Washington's putback after Trumbull missed a 3. That was a physical play. He got a hip on the UCLA player, keeping him from getting the ball when it came off the basket. That's why he was already squared up as soon as he got the rebound and he went up. It's his only basket. He hadn't been doing a whole lot, but he was in the frame of mind, or I wouldn't say he was in the frame of mind to make a play. He wasn't in the frame of mind to not make a play. Mm-hmm. And we've seen them in the frame of mind to not make plays lately in these situations, but that wasn't the case today, and they got to win. There's still a ton to work on, still have some of the same problems. This team needs to improve in every area, a lot. But they got to win, and this is a quad 1 win. Now, who knows what UCLA is going to do in Big Ten play? But Carolina fans should root for them because this is a quad 1 game. Root for Dayton to roll through the A-10. You root for UCLA because they need these, because there's only a handful of opportunities in the ACC. But they got 2 now. And if those stay quad one wins, they have chances, get Duke at home, get Pitt at home, maybe go win at Clemson or win at Florida State, who's having a decent year. Maybe SMU somehow turns into a quad one game. Get 5. They get 5 quad one wins and they win 15 games in the ACC. They'll get into the tournament. It may not be a great seed, but they'll get in.
And you mentioned that this is their last big test before conference play, and they needed this win, and you don't want to call it a must win, but for all intents and purposes, it was. At least in my book. But one thing that I really want to –
Did you see my column Saturday?
It was a must-win. You don't really have must-win games, but
there's a must-win game, and they got it. I don't remember North Carolina ever having a must-win game before Christmas before, but this was it. And it was it because of their own play, and it was it because they're in an atrocious conference.
You mean you list off those quad one win or opportunities.
Conference that's having a bad day in football apparently too. So
last I checked, Clemson they were down 14, got stopped on 4th and goal. So I think that's going to continue.
Anyway, we got to close this out here in a second because this other game's got a few minutes left and they need to come in here. This is where they do the press conferences. So
there's one more thing I want to touch on for how UNC finished off this game. First off, they shot 56.5% in the second half, which
third straight game they've shot in that range in the second half, by the way.
But they've made 4 of their last 6 shots. And what you mentioned, it was this ending of this game was a complete opposite of how the Florida game ended. And it almost was unexpected to a degree just because of how they had been handling it. And they whistled for 17 fouls in the second half. I personally think they were, beneficiaries of UCLA just missing free throws.
Look, UCLA should have won the game. UCLA did enough to be in position to put foot on throat and win, but didn't put foot on throat. And they kept the door open. And you got to credit Carolina for going through. Every team's going to have games every year where they're going to have a few like that they have a chance to win and they take advantage of it, and some they have a chance to win they don't take advantage. For a club that has been as down as this one was, and it's been a while since they got a decent win, and they were questioning things, and they've talked about all the negativity. For them to actually go through that door and get the win says a lot about them. It's one game, it's one day, maybe something they could build from. They don't play until next Sunday against Campbell, and then they hit the road and they open up at Louisville and Notre Dame, which will be tough games for this team because I don't see many games this club plays that you go in saying it won't be tough because they're not exactly rolling out the 2012 Tar Heels or the 2009 Tar Heels. So because of that, they're going to have to scrap and claw and scratch and claw and whatever the other words you want to use are to get wins and hit shots. So.
And then we kind of look at what does this mean for UNC? They're sitting at 7-5. Like I said, likely to be 8-5 when ACC play resumes. If they play Campbell next Sunday. But I still don't think you mentioned it. We don't know everything about this team yet. They still have some of these same issues. Yeah. At the very least, it means they got a win when they needed a win, and they close out a close game, which they have not been doing.
That's what this means. This will be the shortest what this means ever, in part because the game's about over here in a few minutes, but also because I think that's what it is. We'll explore some stuff on some drops this week and some articles. Jacob and I'll have our show. Maybe I do a show with David this week if we have time. We're going to have a lot of stuff we're going to roll out for Christmas Day. We won't be doing anything else Christmas Day. I got to go see my dad, so I'm taking my laptop in case one of these kids pops in the portal, which, hey, let's do it on Christmas Day and screw up everybody.
What happened during the game today? So
yeah, exactly. Oh, well, today it was just crazy. And you and Kevin Roy absolutely hit grand slams today picking up that stuff. So what this means is they got a much-needed win. They felt better. The emotion of Elliot Cadeau coming off the court, tears the other night, but coming off the court today, elated and feeling satisfied. They needed that. So now they get the chance to go 8 days coming off a win, coming off a good win. That'll be good for them.
Yep, and I said 8 days of rest, 8 days to kind of be on a high note, coming off a win and just kind of relish that. But I know we got to get out of here. you like this content, subscribe, like, give us a follow on Twitter. Yeah, I'm Bryant. He's AJ from Madison Square Garden. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks.